Hello everybody, I am Eduardo Franceschi.
And I'm Ben Woods.
So we're here together today to talk about profit and loss and pennies. So Ben, how we get lucky to be here today talking about this and what we expect, accomplish with this presentation?
Well, I don't know if we're lucky or not, but for sure we're going to go through and we're going to talk about a profit and loss statement. And we're going to do it in such a way, if we're lucky, that we're going to be able to explain it in very easy to understand terms. So we're not going to talk about a lot of numbers and graphs and charts and things like that. We're going to try and accomplish what is a PriceSmart profit and loss statement and how can that relate to everybody that's in our organization.
Okay. Very sounds very interesting to me. Okay. So now, how can we define profit and loss?
Well, profit and loss is defined as income that we generate from our sales, minus the expenses that we have to try and generate those sales, and that equals what we call net profit or loss. Now, in our case, we've been pretty good about having profit and not loss.
Okay, that's pretty good. So what you're saying right now is that, I understand correctly, is the fact that everything starts with $1 in sales.
That's correct.
That is correct, because we are a penny business.
That's right.
I'm right?
That's right. So if we have a jar that has $1 worth of sales, it means that we've got 100 pennies in that jar.
Well,
pretty good.
That's pretty good. But how do we generate our pennies?
Well, it starts with the sales being able to contribute pennies in that jar. In this case, we'll talk first about what the buying team does for us. So that's the front end gross margin. Now, when we sell a lot of the merchandise that we have in the clubs and it goes through the registers, those are called front end sales. And front end sales will take 87 pennies out of that jar, or if the jar were empty, we could say it's adding 12.3 pennies into the jar. So what we'll do is we'll say that front end sales contribute 12.3 pennies into the jar. Now, the buying team does a pretty good job for us. Do you have any idea how many buyers that we have or how many people are in our buying team?
To be honest with you, no idea.
Yeah, it's more than I thought. When you look at the in-country buyers in the different countries that we have, or whether it's in San Diego or in Miami, it's 178 people.
That's a lot.
So that's a lot of people that are working for us to contribute those pennies.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So we have other types of income, don't we?
Yeah, of course we have. So we also make or generate our pennies through our other business department, which is food service, our bakeries, and photo lab business.
Okay.
So all these three departments together, represent 1.4 pennies of every dollars in sales that we generate.
Okay.
So now we're talking about Glenn Harmon and his group.
Okay, but why do we take these other business departments and why do we separate them out on the P&L?
Well, that's a very good question, Ben, because it's very simple. Because as you know, our business is not that complicated, right? So they have their own cost of goods by department. You know what I mean?
Okay.
They also have their own inventory. They also have their own P&L. So they do have higher gross margin percent, okay? And they have a higher production labor intensive, as well, in the same manner.
Oh, I see. So it's like having a business within a business.
Correct.
Okay, so because there's more involved with actually manufacturing an item, whether it's muffins or whether it's pizzas.
That is correct.
There's more involved. And so therefore they've got to kind of track all that separately. Okay, now I understand why they're called other businesses.
That's true. So now that we know that we generate our pennies through total margin department, okay, which is front-end gross margin, as you mentioned before, and we know that Glenn's group, also contribute to our pennies generated through other business. Now, do you think there is another way to continue generating our pennies?
I would say so. I'd like to talk to you about
That's
membership
why you spend.
income.
Okay.
Yes, because that's the one that's going to be nearest and dearest to us, I think, when we
Well,
start
let's see.
talking about how many pennies we have left in the jar at the end of this.
Okay.
So yes, I want to talk to you about membership income. And membership income, it generates an additional 1.4 pennies to our jar. So we'll see how important that is when we get to the end of the presentation. But basically what we've got to focus on is we got to make sure we keep adding more members, but we don't lose the members that we already have when we do the renewals, because as you know, our members renew at the end of every year. So it's the purest form of profit that we have, Eduardo, but why is membership income so important to us?
Well, Ben, we have to be careful when we talk about how important is membership income for us, or how important is for us to continue adding more people. Let's go specific to the cycle of success. Do you remember this?
I remember the cycle of success, yes.
Well, the cycle of success start with, reducing our margin.
Okay.
Okay? When we reduce our margin, we are able to lower our prices. So once we, lower our prices, we are able to get more members. We add more members because more people are happy, right? So that allows us to continue driving our sales,
Okay.
increase our sales, right? So when we increase our sales, having all these people happy buying for PriceSmart, right? We were able to leverage our expenses at the way we buy merchandise.
Okay, so now I understand why members are so important. If we have more members, it allows us to sell more merchandise.
Correct.
When we sell more merchandise, we're able to get better costs for our merchandise, which
Absolutely.
means we can extend that savings to our members and have even lower prices. So it becomes a cycle, as we call it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I would say that, we're lucky to have Jose Luis Marin and his group doing a very good job the last 7 years, if I remember correctly, to be this, cycle of success very successful for us.
Okay, all right, good. Well, I think I understand how important those members are to us a little bit better now.
So now, do you think that's the last way, the last manner that we have to continue, generating our pennies, or there is something more?
Well, I know we've put a pretty good amount of pennies in the jar so far, but I think there's a few more still out there. So
Okay.
Another area that we should look at is the other income line. And the other income line includes basically our demo program. When you go out to the club and we're out there sampling products for members, there's a fee that's associated with that. We don't charge a lot, but we charge enough to make money off of it, and take that as a few additional pennies to the income line. In our case, other income adds 0.4 pennies. And like I said, it's mostly the vendor relations group, but also there is some miscellaneous income or some rental income. So that would be the other income line. But we also need to talk about what could impact our pennies, because depending on how we run our business, even having talked about all those things, there is the possibility that we could add additional pennies, or we could be subtracting pennies.
That's true.
So we have other parts of our business that involve what we call accruals, which mean that we're going to run our business, but we're going to assume that there's going to be a certain cost associated with certain things as part of running our business. So we have salvage and throwaways as one, which, for example, in the fresh areas, if something spoils or it's no longer saleable, then we're not going to put it out for sale, right?
Yeah.
So we assume that we're going to have a certain amount of spoils, so we accrue a certain amount of money for that. Just like with shrink, we assume we're going to have a certain amount of shrink, but our job is to try and keep that shrink as low as possible. And it's the same with cost of goods adjustments. We've got the cost to get the merchandise to whatever market that's going to be receiving and selling it. We could have over, shorts, or damages, or there are even things like foreign exchange costs, where if a currency appreciates or devalues. Now, when you take all those things and you add them up and you look at the accruals that are associated with those things, It's our job to not spend all that money, right?
I got you.
I don't think that that any of our bosses want to know that we spent all of the money that we accrued on shrink.
Yeah.
They would prefer to see what we call a pickup.
I agree.
So those things, if we manage our business properly, which we have significantly well over the years, that adds another 0.6 pennies into our jar.
Okay, so I would say that every penny counts so far, right?
I would say so. You know, at this stage, we had a jar that started out empty, and for every dollar in sales, we've been able to contribute 16 pennies.
That's what we have so far.
Yeah,
After all this review, right?
right. So we're done, right?
I don't think so, because what you understand right now is our goal is to continue driving sales and, you know, putting more pennies into the jar. Is that correct?
Yes, you know, definitely the more members, the more merchandise we buy, the more we sell, the more sales we generate. Definitely, as John Hefner would prefer, we'd like to put a few more pennies in that jar.
Okay, that sounds good so far. But now we get into, you know, where we have to discuss what take pennies out of the jar.
Okay,
And
so
that-
now we're talking about expenses.
That is correct. And that starts for controllable expenses,
Okay,
followed by non-controllable expenses. And finally, we have other expenses.
okay, so there's 3 different types of expenses.
That is correct. Now everybody needs to know.
I hope that's not a lot of pennies.
Let's see what happened. But now, talking about controllable expenses, Ben, what do you think is the biggest, big, or whatever you think, the expense that take out more pennies of the jar?
Payroll. Our people.
You're
Our
right.
biggest investment.
I agree.
And we invest well because we make sure that we pay the best possible wages, we extend the best possible benefits,
Yeah.
and you know, we have a very good team. I mean, I think we can all say, and we could probably speak for everybody in the whole company, we have, I think, one of the best teams in the industry. And that's because we pay well and we hire right. So we have good investments in our people.
Right.
Now, it is our number one expense. And in the case of that jar with the pennies, that's going to take 3 pennies out of that jar. So we started out with 16 and now we're down to 13.1 pennies. So that's our biggest controllable expense, but I believe obviously we have others. What's the second biggest controllable expense?
Well, Ben, you know, I like to say that the second one is utilities.
Utilities, okay?
Yeah, because it's very important that everybody understand what is utility about. Utility is electricity. When we talk about utility, we also talk about gas consumption to be able to generate that 1.4 pennies that we saw before in other business.
Okay.
Okay, and finally we have our water supplies inside that utility account. So I just want to point something out, and it's the fact that we all play a key role, you know, doing a pretty good job in our energy saving program that we have in every single place in our company. Every single office, every single person play a key role to be able to reduce this utility expense.
I would say so, especially when it seems like every time we get the electric bill, the price per kilowatt hour is
Correct.
going up and not down. So I agree with you. It makes a lot of sense to put timers on the equipment so that we can use it only when we need it, or just simple things like turning off the light behind you when you walk out of your office. So
Yeah, because we gotta be clear with that, because it's true that we can control the cost of every kilowatt per hour that we pay. But we do, you know, or we can control the amount of kilowatt per hour that we spend. And that's the opportunity that I see at the company see by creating this energy saving program. And it's important that everybody knows that that's the goal.
especially being that it's our second biggest warehouse controllable expense.
Sure. So beside utility and payroll, as you mentioned before, what do you think is our third biggest expense in controllable expenses?
It's one that a lot of people don't think about, and it has to do with credit cards. You know, do you have any idea how much we of our sales are done through credit cards?
Throughout the company? How can I know? No idea.
Well, I'll tell you, it's about 51%.
Wow, that's high.
It's pretty significant. Now, when we take a credit card, we have to pay a fee to the bank for that. It's not free. It'd be nice if we took all cash and we didn't have to take credit cards, but that's not a reality of our business. So 51% of our sales are generated through credit card sales, and we pay a fee. It depends, you know, in the countries that we operate, but it ranges anywhere from 1.28% all the way up to 2.9%. So it's pretty significant. So it's the third biggest expense. And one of the ways that we can try to reduce that expense is through our PriceSmart credit card program. You know, in Central America, we have the Credit card, and in the Caribbean, we have the Scotiabank card. And those are agreements that we set up with those banks. And, you know, the goal is to get more of those credit cards into our members' hands, because if we do, we don't pay a fee. So we're not paying anything to a bank. The agreement is that there's no charge. So it allows us to further reduce that expense. So the more credit cards we get out in the market, the lower that bank and credit card expense can be. So Eduardo, what's the fourth largest controllable expense?
Well, it's repair and maintenance. As everybody knows, that's one of the favorite John lines.
Oh, that's the one that we spend a lot of time talking about.
Every single conference call that we do weekly. On top of that, you know, I'm satisfied with, you know, having a conference call every week. He's saying every day I email about that. And then, you know, I understand, you know, the idea, because it's one of our biggest expense that we have inside the equation. But when we talk about repair and maintenance, we need to know something clear, right? What is all of this about? Our equipment get older, right? By knowing that, we are forced to improve the preventive maintenance that we have right now to get those equipment up and running, taken care of. Do you agree with that?
I agree. I think preventative maintenance, if it's done properly, should make the equipment last longer, and it should make things better for us to run the business.
That is correct. The other thing is to make, how can we making sure that our people know what to do in the best way possible?
Yeah, I agree, because if they operate the equipment properly, hopefully that will keep our expenses down.
That is correct. And then, you know, what happens if we don't do right these two things that I already mentioned?
Well, then it sounds like there'll be a few more pennies coming out of the jar.
Correct. By having several downtimes. So downtime affect not only pennies, but affect productivity and efficiency.
That's true. If we have the equipment down, it'll affect the sales.
And if you want to add something more to that equation, is member service.
That's true.
You know what I mean? So which is very important to mention. And all of this tied into the jar. Taking out more pennies. So how many pennies we have now? I don't know for sure, because I'm pretty sure there is another big line which is coming after repair and maintenance that you want to share with all of us.
Yeah, that one is supplies, and that's the one that a lot of people can relate to, because we spend, I don't know, it's one that we probably talk about more often. So whether it's the toilet paper in the bathrooms or the copy paper that goes into the admin department, but it would be supplies. And in this case, supplies are deducting another 0.3 pennies, and that's taken us down to only 10.7 pennies. So of course it's important that we continue to try and manage the business as best as we can, and not try to, you know, spend more than we need to in supplies to do that. Yeah. So are there any other type of controllable expenses that we didn't talk about?
Yeah, sure. There is a few left, which is good, you know, to mention as well, which is marketing, which is the cost that we spend to be able to add more members, right? Followed by security and protection, which is the cost that the amount of money that we pay to protect our pennies, okay, pick them up and take them
to the bank.
Exactly, and have them safe, right, in a good place. And then we have telephone, which is related to, you know, the cost of cell phones, the club line phones, and to have a great communication and keep, you know, continue improving our our team efforts. And finally, we have equipment rental, which is very important to mention that if we have the need to rental something, we can go for it. If not, it's untouchable. Should be not expense related to that line.
Right.
But we have that, okay, in case we need it.
Right.
So all these expenses together represent 0.5 pennies into the equation.
Another 0.5 pennies.
Another 0.5 is going out of the jar.
Okay. Okay.
So now that we know, Ben, how much represent every line of our expenses or our controllable expenses into the controllable profit, do you want to share with us how many pennies we have left?
Well, let's do a recap just to make sure that we got things straight so far as far
Okay.
as how many pennies.
Sounds good.
So we're about halfway down on our profit and loss statement. So we're down to what we call controllable profit. So we started out with an empty jar. We generated $1 in sales, and that gives us with the front end gross margin and the other business gross margin and the other income and the things that we spoke about.
Sure.
It's given us 16 pennies.
Sure.
But then we just got done talking about our warehouse controllable expenses, the payroll and the utilities and the repair and maintenance and supplies and those things. And that's taking out another 6 pennies. So it leaves us with our warehouse controllable profit, which in this case is down to 10 pennies. So are we done yet?
I don't think so.
So there's other expenses.
That's why I wanted
talk
to
about?
know. I wanted to know how many pennies we have left to face what is coming.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Which is important because I'm starting to get a little concerned about how many pennies we are taking out of the jar.
Yeah, there's not many in there.
Exactly. So now we have our non-controllable expenses
Okay.
that I mentioned before, right? But what is non-controllable expenses? When we talk about non-controllable expenses, we talk about depreciation, which is the money or the cost that have our larger equipment, which are spread out throughout the years, right? And then we have also rent. That's the money that we pay in every single club where we have to pay rent to be able to operate, right?
Okay.
Beside that, we have tax and license, which is the money that we pay to the government, okay? And finally, we have our insurance. That's the money that we pay to keep our club safe, our employees safe, our members safe, our business safe.
Okay, so when we add all those things up, that takes us to the next line on the P&L, which we call warehouse profit.
Yeah, but let me tell you something. When you put together all these lines that I just brought out,
Yeah, because we got to talk about, well, how many pennies is that going to affect?
3 pennies
3
more
pennies.
going out of the jar. And it's important to mention that because now you have to recap again
Oh boy, here we
to see
go.
what we have.
All right, so let's see if I can remember this correctly then. We started out with the 16 pennies.
Right.
That's the front end sales, that's the buying group.
Right.
Then we have the other business departments.
Correct.
The bakery, food service, and photo. And then we have the other income.
Yes.
So when we add all those things up, for $1 in sales on average, we're getting
16.
about 16 pennies.
Yes.
Okay, and what the most important part of that was membership. Right? The
yeah.
membership. So 16 pennies. And then we're taking out 6 pennies to basically operate the clubs at the controllable level. So that's the payroll, the supplies, the utilities, and repair and maintenance and those things. So that's given us the 10 pennies.
Yeah.
But then we just talked about more expenses. So we talked about these non-controllable expenses you mentioned. So
Sure.
depreciation and tax and license and those things. And now we're down to how many pennies? 7?
Correct.
Okay, all right, we're getting a little short. I hope
we
we're
don't-
almost done.
And we don't done yet.
There's still more expenses?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There is one line more.
You see the expression on my face, right?
Yeah, I'm seeing that, but I'm trying to make better.
Okay.
Just to support you and avoid to be in the same boat. But the thing is that we still have one section left,
Okay.
which is our other controllable. But when we talk about other controllable, we specifically talk about central overhead, which include all the support department to our operation. So specifically talking about accounting people, buying group, marketing, human resource people, all these people, represent that central overhead expenses. Followed by pre-opening expense, which is the money that we spend to be able to open a new club.
Well, that's important.
Yeah. And then finally we have our insurance.
Okay.
Our interest. Okay, the interest that we have to pay to the bank. That's it. I think.
You sure?
That's
There's no
it.
more?
Yeah, but the sad part, Ben, is that all these expenses together take additional 4 pennies.
Four, not 0.4.
No,
4 pennies.
4 pennies out of the jar.
Okay.
I can't imagine how many pennies we have left yet.
Well, I guess we'll have to go back and recap it again. So we started out with our 16 pennies. We took away our 6 pennies, so now we've got 10 pennies, and that's the warehouse controllable profit. Now we're taking out another 3 pennies for the non-controllable expenses. So we're taking out another 4 pennies for the additional expenses that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So that means that our net income is down to only 2.9 pennies.
To be, 3 pennies.
Okay, we can round it up to 3.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 2.9/3 pennies, I mean, that's not very many. I mean, how important are those pennies to us?
Oh,
Eduardo?
man, I think the right question will be, or just to recap a little bit, behind, is the fact that how important is membership income to those 3 pennies. Because membership income, if I remember correctly, you mentioned before that represent 1.4 pennies.
That's correct.
So when you
Didn't seem like a lot at the time when we talk about all these other pennies.
exactly when you see that, already you have in your head that membership income represent half of those 3 pennies that we already have in the jar.
So what you're telling me is that for every dollar in sales that we generate, once we pay all our bills,
Yeah.
we get down to 2.9 pennies. And of those 2.9 pennies, 1.4 of them, basically almost half, is contributed by membership income.
That's correct.
Wow.
So just to reinforce that, that's why without members, we have no business.
Well, I guess that's what we mean when we say we're truly a membership warehouse shopping club.
Yeah.
Now I understand.
Yeah, that's
now
true.
I get it.
That's true, and that takes you to another topic. What is happening if we don't, get those 1.4 membership income?
Well, then it's not giving us the 2.9, and the 2.9 is what we need to keep, maintaining and growing our business, right?
Correct.
I mean, we just opened up a location in Colombia. I know that we have more that we're going to open there, and I know we have more that we're going to open in some of our other markets. So if I remember, that cycle of success was all about having more members and driving more sales and getting more of those 2.9 pennies so we continue to keep growing the business. So now I realize just how important they really are as we continue to do a great job growing our business.
Sure. And now that we become a 2 billion company business, how important is that? You can make your own conclusion.
Well, I would say that when people say, wow, they're doing $2 billion, they must be making money hand over fist. But now we realize that's really not the
they're
case.
driving Ferrari, they have helicopter, they have all those things, right? Which is not.
That's
which
correct.
Is not.
That's
and just to back that out, the fact that we all again play a key role, you know what I mean? Improving what we do by continue driving our sales, okay? In order to maintain our jar, taking pennies instead of the pennies going out. That's the key message that we want to basically leave to everybody today.
Well, for sure, I realize now that having reviewed everything is definitely a team effort to keep those 2.9 pennies in the jar.
Correct. And I know, we have done a very good job in the last, 5-7 years in that comment. But I know as well that we can do better. that we can do better every day, we can do better every time, we can do better, you know, if everybody understands correctly this message. And then, you know, finally, we know that we only, after this presentation, get only 3 pennies. That's what I'm gonna give you right now in front of everybody. So I have everybody present. And
So you're gonna give me the 3 pennies?
yeah, I can't,
Wow.
I can't finish this presentation without, you know, giving to Ben the 3 pennies that we have today here. And we accomplished, after review, how we wrote and how we manage our business. So there is 3 pennies. Show them.
Wow. Well, all I can
That's what
say
we
is,
get.
Eduardo, thank you. I'm feeling generous, so I'm going to give you 2 back.
Okay.
Okay?
Nice.
I don't want any change.
Okay.
Okay. And I guess we better get back to work because we got to go drive a few more dollars worth of sales to
I'm
get
pretty
more
sure.
of these pennies.
I'm pretty sure. I don't have the intention to give you anything back, but you know, just to make sure you know that.